Geico presents Our Town, Season 2, a 30-minute podcast produced by Best Bart Communications, a small but fierce client-centered marketing company powered by decades of experience and well-established business networks. Geico, 15 minutes can save you 15% or more on car insurance. Now, here's your host, Andy Ockershausen.
This is Our Town, and this is Andy Ockershausen, and I'm so delighted for many, many reasons that I'll get into to talk to our guests, as I've known for many years. I would say it's close to 3 decades, if not more. I can still remember listening to Ric Edelman as a guest with Trumbull & Core, talking about Disney stock and what a great Christmas gift that would be, or about the value of 12 Days of Christmas, or his fabulous Thanksgiving dinners with his wife, Jean. He was part of the WMAL family, a big part of the success of the greatest radio station in the world at one time. He has the longest running show for cash paid for on WML radio in history. This man's a genius. He's an author, an innovator, a philanthropist, a visionary. He's my financial planner. He has the ear of so many important people in Congress and Wall Street. And according to the Wall Street Journal, he recently sold his company for $880 million. And he didn't have a mortgage, which pleases me no end. And I use this all the time, Rick. It still stands. He made me a small fortune.
That's because you started with a large one.
See, that you remember that too. And welcome, my very dear friend, Ric Edelman. Welcome to Our Town, Rick.
Thank you, Andy.
Which is your town, too.
And Jan, it's good to be with you both.
You too.
You was such an important part of Our Town and our growth and all those names that I mentioned to you.
Can I correct all the mistakes you made in your intro?
No.
Okay.
It was actually $860 million.
Well, neither one of those numbers has been confirmed.
No, we heard.
And my initial broadcast was with John Lyon.
Is that right?
Not Trumbull and Core.
You mean a phone in?
No, my very first radio interview here at WMEL was with John Lyon.
You know, we hear about John all the time because of the girls. That story is still stirring around, as you know. But why do we get that at Trumbull & Core?
Well, because I was on with Chris and Bill. But
was it a phone or were you in studio?
Both. I mean, I was on periodically, and I had the back line, so whenever I heard them talking about something, I could get myself on the air to tell them they were crazy. But it was John Lyon who discovered me.
Well, did they come to you for this information you can provide, or they answer you questions about the market?
Yeah, John Lyon invited me onto the air one day. I think reluctantly, Rick Fowler, who's still on the air here at WMEL, I think twisted John's arm and said, "You really got to talk to this guy." And John reluctantly, I believe, agreed to put me on the air on a Friday afternoon at 2 p.m. in his final hour of his 4-hour show for a 15-minute interview. Which meant a grand total of 6 minutes of airtime. And John was so impressed that he kept me on through the bottom of the hour and then asked me to stay for the rest of the hour. I ended up staying the entire hour. And at the end of the hour, he said, "Finally, you're the first guy I can ever understand about this subject," and he invited me back to come on the show, and I ended up becoming a regular for John, appearing at least once a month for a couple of years until he left the station.
That was in the 80s, of course.
Yes, and then after John left, because he had a 6-day show, right, Monday through Saturday, and after he left, there was a little bit of a hiatus, but ultimately they gave me his Saturday morning show, which
right.
it was originally a 4-hour program, which I did, and I'm still doing 25 years later.
That's amazing. It's amazing. I did not know it was John Lyon, and my producer didn't know it. We thought it was Trumbull & Core.
I first heard Ric Edelman's voice talking about the Disney stock as a great Christmas present on the Trumbull & Core show, and I was just stunned. I thought the information was great. I too feel like I could understand it, and you had to be on this radio station.
Well, it's been a privilege and a pleasure to be here all these years.
Well, see, but people didn't know the beginning, but there was a beginning of Ric Edelman, and that's in our town. And thank God it was a part of WMAL, because I would hear you occasionally when there's a big story. Hardin Weaver or the news person would talk to you in the morning.
Yeah, whenever there was a financial story breaking, the newsroom would call me, or Chris would, or or Hardin and Weaver or whoever,
right.
And I would, I was the go-to guy.
Right, you were the resident expert,
right.
more or less,
right.
without being a resident. And then that led to your own show,
right,
and led to your own popularity. But in our town, Rick, in growing up here, there was never anybody like you before. In my experience in radio and television, then it was not paid attention to finance. We sort of ignored it as an entity, an entertainment entity,
right,
until we found out it could be entertaining, which is what the secret of your show is.
Yeah, that's really the key. There was, even today, if you look at the Washington Post, they don't have a personal finance section in the newspaper. They have a business and economics section. And that's true of most newspapers. They treat Wall Street as a business issue. It's a place for investors, and it's about economics or public policy in the case of the New York Times or the Washington Post. And my attitude has been, no, this is pocketbook stuff. This is affecting people's lives on a daily basis. And I'm not talking about global macroeconomics. I'm talking about how much do you tip a waiter? And
grocery shopping, daily thing.
Yeah, I mean, should you buy insurance? And if so, what kind? And how do you pay for it? And what's the difference between a insurance agent and an insurance broker? Should you buy or lease a car? How do you choose the choices in your employee benefits at work? And understanding a 401k or a 403b or the thrift savings plan, on and on and on. And so it was all about pocketbook issues of people just living their daily lives and realizing that dollar signs permeate through just about every decision we make on a regular basis. And that's been my focus, just down in the trenches, helping you get by and taking care of your ability to get your kids into college, buy a home, care for aging parents, and of course, retirement security.
Well, Rick, going back to your suggestion at the time, and Janice heard it, and I recall it vividly, about what a great Christmas gift, give somebody some Disney stock. You work for the company. Little did you know, maybe then, but that was a wonderful idea.
Well, the context was partly as you describe, what can I do as a Christmas present this year?
Right.
And my attitude of always providing financial education. And how do you get kids involved in money? Get them engaged. And so I said, just simply buy them a single share of stock. This way, and let them pick the stock. Choose a company they know. If it's, little kids, Disney stock is a perfect illustration. Back in the day, we were, the station owned by Disney, so it made sense. Buy them Mattel, little girls playing with Barbie. Buy them General Motors for little boys who want to deal with Corvettes.
Right.
And I'm being horrifically sexist today, but back in the 80s is what we used to talk about. And I made the comment that if you buy a share of Disney and have them ship you the certificate, this is the key point. Not only do the kids get to frame it and put it on their wall and see it every day, their certificate's gorgeous because they have the Disney characters in full color on the stock certificate. So it's like getting Disney art and
wallpaper.
As wallpaper. And so that's that was where the idea came from.
Well, it was a great thought, and that struck a chord with us. But way back before that was a Ric Edelman. Let's go back to you were born in Pennsylvania because you didn't have a hospital in New Jersey.
Yeah, I was. My parents lived in New Jersey. They were both from Philly, but did the exodus after World War II to the new burgeoning suburbs in South Jersey, outside of Philly.
Know it well.
And but when it came time to have a baby, my two older brothers were already alive, but I was born a year after my parents moved to South Jersey. But they had to go back to Philly to the hospital, Hahnemann. And so there were no hospitals in South Jersey. There wasn't a supermarket or a laundromat either. So
maybe they've got a plaque in that hospital. I would hope so. Here starts Ric Edelman. I remember only one thing before. I met your dad and your mom because you had a celebration here for the year. That must have been
40th birthday party.
Yeah.
At 1993, because that was the year we got married and we were going on our honeymoon the following week. And they from Glassboro. Only thing I ever knew about Glassboro was the Russians.
Yeah, the Kosygin-Johnson Summit.
I thought it was a Russian community,
right?
But that was just a meeting place, right? Glassboro State,
right? So I
that
grew
was
up,
your school.
It was. I grew up in Cherry Hill, New Jersey, and then went to college at Glassboro State College. That's where I met Jean. She was a year behind me, and Glassboro was a sleepy little college town.
Must have been.
And that's how I got in. No way I could have gotten in anywhere like that. So today, Glassboro State's a very big deal. It's now Rowan University.
That's right. I know the name.
Henry Rowan donated $100 million, so they renamed.
A good start.
Yeah, well,
but it is a state university.
Give me $100 million, I'll change my name. So that's what Glassboro did. And they're a pretty big deal now. Major regional university. They own 2 hospitals, not just one, and major learning center in engineering.
About 25,000 students now?
There's probably about 15,000 at this point, but SAT scores are dramatically higher than I would have ever been able to get in on. And so it was a wonderful place to go to school, and I credit a lot of what I've learned and in business.
You followed Kosygin then. He was there before you.
Well, the Johnson-Kosygin summit, of course, was the 60s, way before me. The only claim to fame Glassboro had was that summit, and true to Glassboro's name, the summit was a failure. But it was destined to fail. Kosygin was at the UN. Johnson was in D.C. Neither one would travel to the other. Glassboro was exactly halfway between D.C. and New York. That's how the summit occurred.
But it was worldwide publicity. I recall it vividly until your I don't know how I found out about Glassboro. Maybe I found out with your father and mother at the party that year. Anyway, that you went to school there and met Gene. But where did this finance thing come from? And not from Glassboro.
Not at all. No,
that was a regular university, right? At school.
Liberal
arts
school.
It's a university now.
It is now, but it was a sleepy little college. It was a teacher's college predominantly, which is why I went there. I was majoring in education. I switched over to communications, and when I came to Washington immediately out of graduation, I was here within 2 weeks. Back in college, I was interning for a congressman, and my intent was to come to Capitol Hill and work there for Congress. Quickly decided I didn't like Capitol Hill. Didn't like, for all the reasons everybody hates Capitol Hill. But I loved the D.C. area, so stayed here. Jean came down a year later when she graduated, and we've been here ever since. That was 1981.
Did you get married here or in Jersey?
In Princeton, where Jean was from Cranberry, New Jersey, outside of Princeton, and so we got married in Princeton.
But didn't go to school there neither. So you picked Glassboro over Princeton.
No, we visited once. They kicked us off the campus.
So you ended in Washington working for the Congress here?
For a day, a whole day. And then I went to work in the nonprofit sector for a trade association in the healthcare field. And I was their writer, editor, and meeting planner. Did that for a couple of years and then moved over to pure journalism, which is basically what my degree was in. Journalism, advertising, PR, communications, radio, TV, film, all that kind of good stuff. And the publisher I was working for, I was editor of a pharmaceutical magazine because the healthcare trade group I was with was in the rehab field. And so my expertise was developing in healthcare and medicine. But my publisher owned dozens of publications, including several in the financial field. And there were 23 of us on the writing staff, and we would occasionally help each other out with deadlines.
Based in Washington?
Here in D.C., yes. And
in our town?
Yes, in McLean, actually. And I started writing in the financial trade press just on an as-needed basis, and that was my intro to money. Until then, I knew nothing about money. I continue to brag today that I graduated college without ever having taken a business class. And that's weird for somebody who built a firm managing now $18 billion in assets. But I've learned it really, really helped me because I wasn't brainwashed by those guys in business school.
I understand that. You were fresh idea with a fresh face, which we always said, Rick. You had a perfect face for radio, and we love you for that. Thank the Lord every day we thank for Ric Edelman and what he's done for WMAL and for our town. And this is Andy Ockershouse, and I'll be back in a moment with more Ric Edelman.
Daddy, where do babies come from?
Honey?
Mommy went to the store.
Oh, well, you see, there's a mommy and a daddy, right?
Right.
And see, when they call Geico, they could save a bunch of money on car insurance.
Oh, really? And that makes them happy?
Yes, that makes them very happy.
That's good.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad we could have this talk, Sunshine.
Geico, because saving 15% or more on car insurance is always a great answer.
You're listening to Our Town.
This is Our Town. Andy Ockershouse, and he explained to Ric Edelman, our guest, that everything we talk about in this radio signal that we have at WML, we consider Our Town. You've been such a big part of that and the success of this radio station and our involvement with the community. And Janice and I recall vividly the story of you traveling to New York City right after the 9/11, or somewhere in that period, and found out you personally felt that the city was not only devastated, but people were in shock. Nobody was working. Restaurants weren't crowded. Subways were okay. and you came back and talked about it.
Yeah, we all remember vividly, of course, and we all wanted to help. We all wanted to do something in support, and a lot of us, just donated money. Many donated time and effort. And I remember vividly Rudy Giuliani saying, "Please come to New York. The city needs you. We need your tourism dollars. We need to get the city back moving again." And so Gene and I looked at each other and said, okay, the mayor has just said come, so we're going. So we went with another couple, clients of ours and good friends, and the four of us went to the city. It was 11 days after the bombing. And we went to the city, and we're big fans of the city. Gene and I have an apartment in the city and have had for years these days. But back then, we just love, who doesn't love
the
New
Big
York City,
Apple,
of course. Right? And I've never seen anything like it. It was a ghost town, which is hard to believe with a city of 8 million people. There was nobody on the streets. The only traffic were yellow cabs, and there weren't very many of them. There was nobody in restaurants. Bars were closed. They closed the Oak Room at the Plaza, which, if you know New York, that's gasping. I mean, that's astonishing. And so we spent the weekend in the city, and I remember we went to a restaurant one day, an afternoon for lunch. We were the only people in the restaurant. We were at Rockefeller Center. We were at 30 Rock, and this is the hub. You got 30 Rock, you got Times Square.
That's the fall. That's where it is. New York happens every
exactly,
fall.
And the place was empty. Not a single table except us for lunch. And we got in a conversation with the waiter about it, and he was just describing what life was like in the city in the aftermath of 9/11. And so when we finished, the four of us decided we're going to leave him a $150 tip. And we did. We got up and we left. He came running after us. He said, "You left me too much money." He thought we made a mistake. "You left me too much money." He was trying to give it back. And we looked at him and said, no, that's for you. And he started to cry. And so did we.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that was kind of our therapy.
Could have saved his family. I mean, those were bad days.
It gave him income for the week, but it was. We all remember very vividly that
it affected us in different ways. Janice,
but what was significant is that you came back and you talked about it.
Right.
Yes,
on our
and that made things run.
Yes. So on my show that weekend, I talked about the experience we had in New York and encouraging others to support
Guido
the city.
Adelphio, who shall remain Guido Adelphio on Bethesda Travel, heard the show, knew what you were doing, and planned a bus trip. And he got Janice and several other people that we know and associate with to do that very thing, to go to New York as tourists. And he took them by bus, and they stayed in New York, and they had a wonderful time. Because what you were talking about is it was a humanitarian effort, and it was easy because New York's a great place, particularly in the fall.
It also inspired one of my books. I was working on a book at the time and met with my publisher. And of course, all we talked about was 9/11. That's all anybody was talking about. And they said, "What advice do you have for people?" And I said, "There's a whole raft of things people need to do in the aftermath of 9/11. We have to remember, banks were closed for 3 days. Many businesses were destroyed. People were uncertain as to their economic situation. And there was a lot of advice that needed to be given. And so they said, "Can you write a different book on that?" And so I wrote the book, Financial Security in Troubled Times. I wrote it in the course of a weekend. I wrote it in less than 72 hours.
I wonder how you get this done. You're so prolific in writing. Where do you get the time?
Well, it was my therapy. Like I said, we all wanted to help. And so every time I got tired, I went and turned on the TV and saw the rubble and the first responders dealing with the aftermath, and I went back to typing. And so in 3 days, I produced the manuscript. HarperCollins published the book in less than a week.
Wow.
And it was in bookshelves. All the money went to 9/11 relief funds that we raised from the sale of the book. And everybody in America has done things like, what I'm describing isn't particularly unique or superhuman. We all did a lot to demonstrate, our concern.
Our
and our love
airports
for the
were
city.
shut down for 3 days. Yeah. Nothing happened in Washington National Airport or Reagan. We had a combat air patrol over our town. These were rough times for more than New York City.
It's as emotional today as it was then.
To think about that combat air patrol, and we'd get up for our morning walk and hear this airplane flying.
Well,
over.
I remember listening to the show and hearing you come on the air with a phone call to Chris Core because you witnessed the Pentagon attack, and you became the man on the street reporter because it was just happenstance that
That's
you were there.
exactly right. It was an accident.
But it was so profound and frankly prophetic that you were there, a talented newscaster, being able to communicate effectively about the horrific sights you were witnessing. And that is just another example of WMAL and living in this town.
Just having to be the man on the spot. They were great moments in reflection, but at the time, it was a very, very scary day for our community and our town because we didn't know what the aftermath. You knew there was going to be an aftermath, and we never realized it. But thanks to you, Rick, I know you called, and it meant so much to me. And Janice was worried sick about me and worried that I couldn't get home. And I couldn't. The town was gridlocked. You couldn't go anywhere. But I knew some alleys to get through Northwest Washington. But Rick, talking about
just because you used to linger in those alleys.
I did. A whiz. So all the good things you have done over the years. Now, the books, you still are writing.
I just released my 9th book, The Truth About Your Future.
Yes, and that's the big. You're getting an award for that, correct? On the 24th.
There's an award being given to me, the Lauren Dunton Memorial Award by the IARFC. I won't bother explaining what that is, but it's essentially a Lifetime Achievement Award. It's in recognition of contributions to the financial services industry and to consumers in the personal finance space.
This is you're downplaying, but this is a big award, I'm told. I'm not familiar with the financial world except through your eyes, but it seems to be a big event on the 24th and of significance. But that is not your last book, obviously. This is the latest book, but you'll still continue to write.
And we'll see what comes next. But right now, I'm happy that The Truth About Your Future is doing well. It was an instant New York Times bestseller. It's gotten rave reviews, and it's an important book because it addresses technology in the future and how that's impacting our personal finances. Changes everything. And so, although it's my 9th book, it's really the first of its kind.
Talk a little bit about the contents and what point you're trying to make about the book.
Well, we're living in exponential times. We've all heard of robotics, and we know about self-driving cars and drones, but nobody has really stopped to say, what does it mean for me and my personal finances? And so the book raises awareness and says, here's where we're going, here's what it means. Number one, it means we're going to live an awful lot longer than you realize. Forget about age 85 or 95 life expectancy. You're going to live to 110, 120. And that means retirement is totally changing. It means you're going to work a lot longer, but it also represents risks because robots and artificial intelligence are going to wipe out most current jobs that exist, which means you're going to have to go back to school and get retrained. And that creates disruption. It creates a financial challenge. Where do you get the money to go back to school? How do you maintain your lifestyle while you're transitioning? Has impact on your housing, on insurance, and most important, of course, your investment strategy. And that's what the book explains.
Yeah, but everything you say, it's unbelievable what's happening to our society and what is going to be in the future. It's just more every day I hear about it. It's boggling to me that a man can. I heard a story that many years ago about some learned person in the scientific world said anything a man can think of can happen. And I said, what does he mean by that?
The mind can conceive and believe it can achieve.
Anything a man can think of.
And thanks to Moore's Law, where it basically says computer capability doubles every 18 to 24 months, we are seeing incredibly amazing advances in technology and innovation, and it's the speed with which they're coming that is shocking. It's not that we're going to be flying cars in the future. We all know George Jetson is in the future. The key is how fast it's coming. You want to take a guess when you're going to see flying cars?
10 years.
What do you think, Janice?
2020?
July. Singapore, Indonesia, and India are launching self-flying cars in the summer of 2017. They will carry a passenger up to 220 pounds for a 30-mile trip at 100 miles an hour. The future is here.
Oh, yeah.
And we need to recognize the importance of adapting to this so that we can survive and thrive in the 21st century.
But the things that you're speaking of, and I'm not into that, Rick, any way, shape, or form, but the fact is that companies I heard of 2 years ago are gone now.
Absolutely
Out of
right.
business.
The
It's
best,
amazing.
the best illustration is Kodak. 2012, 135,000 employees, a 100-plus-year-old company goes bankrupt, and because we stopped buying film.
Correct.
And they couldn't adapt to digital photography. Along comes Instagram, 18 months old, 13 employees, is sold for $1 billion because of digital photography. So we have to recognize that companies built for the 20th century will fail in the 21st. And that's why investment management strategy is so vitally important, and why we're spending a lot of energy on this with our clients at Edelman Financial Services, and why it's so vitally important that your investment strategy be one that is designed for success in the future, not built on the past.
Rick, when we first met, I thought you and Gene were working out of your house somewhere in Northern Virginia.
We were living in Maryland. We did something I didn't know you weren't allowed to do this. I don't know if I broke a law, but I certainly. Well, I think it is a law. Frankly, we were living in Maryland when we first moved to the area, and then we moved to Virginia, and I didn't know you're not allowed to do that. And then we moved back to Maryland, and then we moved back to Virginia, and we were just angering everybody, frankly. It's like, how dare you cross that river? It's bad enough.
Oh, my God, yeah.
It's bad enough people do it for work, but to move your residence, oh, my goodness gracious. So we consider ourselves true Washingtonians and not just Marylanders or Virginians. We just love this area so much. And we did begin our business in our apartment. We had a basement apartment. When you start a business, you know what it's like. You start with nothing. And we had no support network here. Our families were not from here. We didn't grow up here, so we didn't know anybody here.
That's right. You were a stranger.
And I was 28 years old. Gene was 27, and we were just, okay, we're going to suddenly provide financial advice to people. And normally when you're going to get into a business, you go to family and friends. That's how you get started. We didn't have any family or friends in the area, and we didn't have any money either. So we moved out of our very pretty 3-bedroom, 3-level French colonial townhouse in Tyson's Corner, and moved back to Maryland up by New Hampshire Avenue into a basement 1-bedroom apartment. We ran an ad
in the city.
It was up in the
Silver Spring,
boonies of Silver Spring, way north Silver Spring. And we ran an ad in the Post saying, moving family must sell everything. And we had a yard sale, and we sold literally everything we owned with the exception of our clothing and a kitchen table my best friend from school built for me. And we sold our television. We didn't own a TV for 4 years. We sold everything we had. We moved into this apartment. We had no furniture. We literally sat on the floor for 4 years with no TV. And I built my business plan in that apartment for creating our financial planning firm. That business plan was 1 page, and it called for me to eventually, after a year, generate a profit of $3,000 a month. And that was my goal. If I could make $3,000 a month, we could pay the rent, we could buy food, and Gene and I would be fine. And that was the basis of starting our fledgling little financial planning practice. That was in the mid-1980s.
And you achieved that goal?
We did.
$3,000 a month?
Well, it took more than 6 months.
Right, but you did it.
We ultimately did. But
you had a goal.
Yes, but it took us more than 4 years to get out of that apartment and move back to Virginia into a townhouse. And so Gene and I know what it's like. When you run an ad saying we're selling everything, you learn that materialism doesn't matter. That stuff, it's just stuff.
True.
The only thing that mattered was that Gene and I were together. We were doing it together.
Knickknacks. Too many knickknacks.
That's exactly right.
Get rid of it.
As George Carlin said, is it a nick or a knack? And so Gene and I did it together. We worked together in building the business, and that's all that mattered to us. So every dollar we generated, every time we collected revenue from a client for providing services to them, we reinvested that money back into the business for growth and improved client service. And we've been doing that for now 31 years.
Well, that's when you got connected with WMAL in the late 80s and mid-80s. I mean, for whatever reason.
Right. What I realized is that, here I am, 28 years old, don't know a soul in town, trying to get people twice my age to invest with me. And why on earth would they give their money to a young kid with no background, no credibility, no experience, no nothing? And so I said, what I need to do is demonstrate my experience. I have to demonstrate my expertise. What better way to do that than by doing a seminar? But when we thought of doing seminars, we realized what we want to do is focus instead on people who are currently being denied advice. We didn't want to go to millionaires because they get advice from everybody.
Whether they like it or not.
Exactly. So instead, let's go to people who are being ignored. And so we went to PTA groups of elementary schools and taught college planning to these young parents. And we did that for a couple of years, and eventually did these seminars to just about every PTA group in the D.C. area. And that's what caught the ear of John Lyon. When he heard we were doing these educational seminars trying to help parents of young kids, that was his
triggered
impetus,
him,
right?
Correct.
To invite me on the air.
To come after you. But
and then from there, News Channel 8 invited me to do a TV gig, and then writing books and so on.
Well, you got that exposure. You could, not being partisan, but I would tell you at one time, this radio station had 4 of every listeners in the greater area, in our town. And that was it's almost impossible to think now how powerful that was to have listeners.
And I had no idea. I was just invited onto the air. I didn't realize the power and strength of WMAL.
And John Lyon was a great interviewer, a great guy. Yeah. We love John.
He made it so easy.
He's a terrific guy.
Janice?
Well, Rick, we're hearing so much about you that I hadn't known, and we're going to come back and talk about your future book. This is Andy Ockershausen, and this is Our Town.
Maybe your kids are about to graduate from college or even get their graduate degree. Or you're looking forward to retirement, finally. Don't go another day without getting your legal house in order. This is Attorney Mike Collins. Let me show you how to get a basic estate plan in place that will protect you and your loved ones in the years ahead with our trademarked Reservoir Trust. All I ask is 2 hours of your time. Check the mail for your special invitation and register now at MikeCollins.com. I'll even waive the tuition. That's MikeCollins.com.
Hi, Tony Sybil here to tell everybody about our newest restaurant over off New York Avenue. It's called Ivy City Smokehouse, 1356 Oakey Street Northeast, right next to the Heck Company warehouse. It is terrific, and we have the only seafood smoker in the District of Columbia. So when you go to your grocery stores or your delis, ask for Ivy City products. 202-529-3300 or ivycitysmokehouse.com.
You're listening to Our Town with Andy Ockershausen. Brought to you by Best Bark Communications.
This is Andy Ockershausen. This is Our Town. I'm talking to Ric Edelman, who's a big part of Our Town, a big part of our success at WMAL. We're hearing stories about how he got started, and I think I've listened to Ric enough to know that everybody's got a chance if they want to take a shot and get busy and work hard.
I want to jump in because I have a different relationship with Ric. I was the account executive for the Edelman Financial Services when I was in WMAL for about 22 years, and Ric was my client, my favorite client, my biggest client. He also set the example for the current programming on WMAL, which is the long-form paid programming on weekends, which we
pioneered at WMAL.
Ric pioneered, and Ric, I have to give total credit for the present-day expert programming that we run on the air, and that everybody has followed suit. So, Ric, you're really just a trailblazer in so many ways.
Well, it wasn't my intention. And in the early days, and even still today, I'm a member of the WMAL talent staff. I'm paid to do the show like other members of the town. I'm a member of SAG-AFTRA, the broadcasting union, along with everybody else. And that model really doesn't exist anymore. So now when people try to get on the air, they do have to buy their way on.
Yes.
That wasn't the case with me.
No, indeed.
So I didn't pay for my show. We just realized we might as well advertise on the station since I'm a presence on the station. It made sense.
You're one of the talent that we brag about on
so
WMAL.
it made sense to advertise on the station, and as a matter of loyalty, we advertised only on WMAL and nowhere else.
I think that is a tremendous sense of pride.
It's a tribute to you, Janice.
For our radio station, WMAL, because you just embraced it, and the audience embraced you, Ric. Honestly, from what I remember, I could be wrong, but what I remember is right there at that pivotal point in our history of our city, our town, as you were emerging, there weren't the masses that invested at the time when you were coming up, not
Right.
like they do now.
Right.
You created that segment. You don't even take credit for it, which I give you credit, but you should take credit for the fact that you have educated, because that's exactly what you were. You are an educator.
Well, I remember the very first question John Lyon asked me in that very first radio interview. He said, "What's a mutual fund?" Which today, everybody knows what a mutual fund
But
is.
then they didn't,
Half
right.
of all U.S. households own them today. But back then in the 1980s, we'd begun to hear about these things, but nobody owned them. This was back in the day when you didn't have a 401k. You had an employer controlling your retirement account. You didn't choose the funds to pick. The employer did it. And so people really weren't familiar with any of this stuff. The notion of financial planning, nobody ever heard that phrase. They didn't know what it was.
And how about don't pay off your mortgage?
Right.
That
Oh,
was
Rick
you,
was- yeah.
Rick.
Oh, my
that was
God.
you. How
Rick.
about the Ricky Trust? That
the
was
Ricky
you.
Trust, all the things we lived through on, like you said, that like it was working for the family store or whatever it is. We didn't think about retirement. We didn't think about hospitalization.
Right.
It was part of being in WMAL
Yeah.
for the employees. I never gave it a thought about I had to worry about my own health.
But today, and so Janice, I think you're right that I came along at a time when people were beginning to have to take responsibility for their own personal finances. You couldn't rely on your employer to do it for you.
That is what happened.
Or the government to do it for you. And you instead were responsible for your own future.
And how about Enron coming along?
Yeah,
And
well-
how about you preparing people so they wouldn't get involved in the Enron
Well,
situation?
we had financial abuse. We had the tech market blow up in 2001. We had all kinds of abusive scenarios occur. We had massively changing tax laws, the Tax Reform Act of '86, and all these kinds of things happen. And so people were really befuddled because there was no outlet. There was no resource for people to get this financial education. And I came along at a fortuitous time in what proved to be one of the most financially successful markets in the country, Washington, D.C., which remains today the most successfully financial market in the country.
And through it all, we always had Ric Edelman to
Answer questions.
to
That's
answer
what I
questions and to carry our fears away, because you would always that's one thing about having a once a week program on a reliable, loyal radio station like WMAL with information, because you are always there to say, do not fear. If you don't like what you see in your statement, don't read your statement.
I became pretty well known for offering controversial, unconventional advice
Correct.
that was not what you typically heard from others in
And
the
that we
industry.
couldn't get enough of.
But
Well, I
that's
appreciate
what
that.
made it, though, Rick. It was, I don't want to use the same expression. No, when Rush Limbaugh came on the air first, people went nuts, and I said, forget him. He's an entertainer. If you don't like the entertainment, turn it off. But with Rick, if you don't like Rick, don't listen to him. But I'd listen to people call you Rick that maybe 6 or 7 credit cards were maxed out.
Right.
And I was often wondered, how can the credit card companies do that? These people are never going to pay their bill. Or they'd say to you, well, I'm only paying $25 a month for life.
So part of the advice we give is helping people get out of their credit card debt.
I'm sure of that.
But the cutting edge, keeping on the news, keeping on top of the news, like Prue.
He
We
did
talked
it.
about Prue before anybody else even knew what was going on. So we always had this feeling that, and you run your business the same way too. We're worried. We're having anxiety about the stock market or whatever. And there's always the next day after the big news story hits, you always send a letter. Your office either used to send a letter, now it's an email. Hey, don't worry about it.
We used to get mail, right?
It's the proactive. It's facing the challenge. It's eating the frog before it happens. You are always in front of the controversy, and that's what makes you
Leader of the
as successful as you are, because you didn't stand back and wait for things to happen. You addressed the concern up front, and that's the value of Edelman Financial Service and we're your clients as far as we're concerned. So this
your
is a
new book is
testimonial.
that now. It's about
Yes,
the future.
it is about the future. You've jumped ahead, and you're addressing these fears that people have.
Well, I appreciate those sentiments very much, and I'll simply add that past performance is no guarantee of future results, and any assertion of the contrary is a federal offense.
No, I understand that. We know there's no sure thing,
No.
except the fact there won't be any sure thing. That is a sure thing. There is no sure thing. Rick, tell me about your community involvement now. That was one of the reasons of your involvement in the community, because I've seen you in and out of the Board of Trade and some other
And United Way, you
United
stepped in.
Way.
Well, Gene and I have always felt that with opportunity comes obligation and responsibility. And so we have always felt it very important to support the community that has done so much for us. And when the United Way's scandal emerged back in the day, and they were looking for new leadership to help fix the organization, I raised my hand and agreed to join the new board that they built. Ultimately became the chairman of the United Way.
Right.
Served on the board for 6 years and helped to reestablish the organization as a legitimate, honorable, trustworthy group worthy of your donations. And when Innova needed help, we discovered that nurses were kind of being forgotten. There's such a focus on medical technology and infrastructure. Let's build another wing, let's buy another piece of gear. At the end of the day, healthcare is all about the people. And so Gene and I provided funding to Innova to create the Edelman Center for Nursing. And we create scholarships. We provide career advancement opportunities for nurses. We sponsor an annual nursing day where 600 nurses get the day off and they come to a conference of subjects just for them. I usually speak. Gene always does. And we've also been very supportive of our alma mater, Rowan University. We provided funding for the Edelman Planetarium, and most recently the Ric and Gene Edelman, the Gene and Ric Edelman Fossil Park.
You better remember that, brother.
And so Gene serves on the board at Innova, rather on the board at Rowan University. She's actively involved with Innova. She's on a number of other nonprofit boards, and we just believe that it's really, really important to say thanks and provide for others for whom we have...
living proof of that, Rick.
Yeah.
And you've had time in all this busy life that you lead. I don't know how you have time. You can write a book and still be involved as you are, but you do it, and you do it so well. And I have not read your new book, but I will. But you mean so much to us and to WMAL, which means so much to also.
Well, I'm very grateful for the opportunity that WMAL gave me. They took a leap of faith. Never before had there been personal finance broadcasting, the subject of money and investing, and they took a gamble. Their reputation was on the line, and they provided me an opportunity that I will be forever grateful for, and I hope that in some small way I've been able to honor the station and its mission by providing valuable content for the audience.
Absolutely, Rick. Nothing but the best. And the great part about it is it goes on today. Like we say, you're the longest running show. A lot of people try to copy Ric Edelman, and they provide programming, and right here on WMAL, but it's different. And whatever reason it's different, they just can't hit the long ball. Like
I can tell you why.
Yeah.
No, you're special. So what is Rick now? What I read about you getting involved with baseball? I know we've been to a couple of receptions involved with Northern Virginia baseball.
Yeah, one of the things that bothers us is if you look at Loudoun County, the fastest growing county in America, highly affluent, very diverse, very large, doesn't have a cultural center. There's no opportunity for affordable, family-friendly entertainment. And so I joined a few others with the idea of let's bring minor league baseball to Loudoun County. I mean, traipsing into D.C., I love the Nationals. I was the first person to buy season tickets to the Nationals when they first came to town.
No kidding.
So I'm the longest season ticket holder.
10, 11 years ago.
I'm the longest season ticket holder, 4 seats right behind home plate.
Do you ever go?
Oh, yeah.
You're so busy writing.
I go to 10 to 20 games a year.
Oh, do you?
Big, huge fan of the Nationals. But it's a bit of a haul going from Northern Virginia all the way into the Nationals. It's also, let's admit it, very expensive to go to professional sports. A family of 4 can't afford to do this very easily. But if we can provide local minor league ball where it's literally in the neighborhood, where tickets are $10 and a hot dog is $3, this is a huge opportunity for families to enjoy themselves in an affordable way. That's true Americana. So I don't know if we can pull it off or not. The economics, frankly, are against us because we're doing this in such an affordable nature with no government financing, which is unheard of in sports stadiums. Frankly, it's not that exciting an investment. I'm doing this as a private enterprise, not involved with Edelman Financial Services, because quite frankly, it's not something I could recommend to clients. It's not that good an investment opportunity, but it's a fabulous investment opportunity for the community.
Right.
So we're hopeful to make it happen, and the jury's out yet as to whether we'll be able to.
One of the problems, the affluences caused the problem. Land values in that county have shot up.
Yeah.
It's a very expensive place to live. Didn't used to be.
And county finances are a challenge, and quite frankly, the county has better things to do with its money than build a stadium.
Right.
There are schools, and there are hospitals, and there are poor, and there are needy, and there are all kinds of issues. So asking the county to come up with tens of millions of dollars to build a ballpark isn't something I can agree with.
No.
So the question is, can we build it through private funding?
Money.
And that's frankly something that's never been done. So I don't know if we can do it, but if the community wants it built, it'll happen.
Well, we many years ago involved with the Community Chest and United Way now, we try to get money out of certain Northern Virginia families, like the Mars family, that has enough impact on this community and this world to supply the money to do something like that, and we've never been successful.
Well, there are lots of wealthy families in the area. There are lots of individuals and foundations.
Not compared to Mars.
Yes, there are.
Really?
There are a lot of folks around here who have the ability to write checks. The fact that they don't write checks is not a criticism of them at all.
I'm not saying
They're
that.
heavily involved in their own charitable philanthropic activities, and that's what makes the world go round. So we'll see what happens. If
the problem with our Mars here in Arlington, they're not going to help you in Loudoun County. Anyway, I like Mars Field.
I don't think that our efforts to build a ballpark have anything to do or not to do with any particular wealthy family.
Well, I'm involved in it, and I care about it because of Loudoun County, because of you, and because my affinity with baseball, growing up here with the Senators, and so happy they're back. I was there last night and had a wonderful evening, and I just can't tell you how important it is to a community to get people together from time to time. That's what it would be, and it's a cultural thing. I know that's a long reach, but I think baseball would be part of the culture of young people.
Well, of course,
up.
It's not just about baseball. By building the stadium, now you can do concerts there. Now you can do Little League. Now you can do high school graduations. Now you can. What you're doing is building a facility that draws that creates a center of influence for the community to come together in a fun, enjoyable, family-friendly way. It's not about baseball. It's about creating a family-friendly opportunity in Northern Virginia, which currently, sadly, for all the affluence that we have in this town, it doesn't exist.
The most cultural thing out there is Redskins, and they want to move into the city. Well, Rick, this has been a delightful time to find out all this about you. I thought we knew anything, but you talk about Janice has listened to you all these years. She's run her business like that. Only 7 years, but she's been exceedingly successful, Janice, because of Ric Edelman.
My base, my first big client when I made the transition from production and promotion into sales, Ric Edelman. Rick Fowler brought Ric Edelman to me, and he was my very first client. You were my very first client on WMAL. Unbelievable.
And your very first client in your own business.
Yeah.
Well, we've grown up together, Janice.
Yes, we have.
Best Part Communications. Yeah. Rick, we wish that Jean was here with you because she knows the stories.
And she would tell the truth. I made all this up.
I know. So. You're a financial planner. We understand that. But Rick, nothing but the best for you. I hope your book is a huge seller, and I know it will be, and I'm waiting for the next one. And I'm kind of scared of this future you're talking about. Unfortunately, I don't think I'll see much of it, but the community will, and it's going to be so exciting. And it'll be changed from what we think today. Next week's going to be different.
Well,
what
Andy,
you just told me about what they're doing in
July
just blows my mind.
Well, it's been a lot of fun being here and reminiscing, and I'll just encourage everyone to stay tuned to WMAL.
Way to go. This is Andy Ockershouse, and this is Ric Edelman, and this has been Our Town.
You've been listening to Our Town, Season 2, presented by Geico, our hometown favorite, with your host, Andy Ockershausen. New Our Town episodes are released each Tuesday and Thursday. Drop us a line with your comments or suggestions. See us on Facebook or visit our website at ourtowndc.com. Our special thanks to Ken Hunter, our technical director, and WMAL Radio in Washington, D.C. for hosting our podcast. And thanks to Geico. 15 minutes can save you 15% or more on car insurance.